Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you on our platform. I'm Sudhir, and this is an exclusive fireside chat with Mahesh Palashikar. He's the president of GE South Asia, a very well-known name in India's energy industry. And of course, Mr. Rajneesh Gupta, he is an associate partner with EY India. That's very broadly on the topic of decarbonization, and how the decarbonization of India's energy sector is likely to, pan out, and what are the policy roadmaps or the policy levers that are required for us to achieve the ambitious renewable energy or clean energy targets that we have. It's very broadly going to cover there are three different pillars in which the entire discussion is going to happen, including the energy sources and the mix of energy choices that we need to look at. The combination of things that we want on grid side, the storage side, etc. And finally, we'll talk about funding. I welcome both of you on this discussion and on our platform, Mahesh and Rajneesh.
Thank you.
Mahesh, let me start this discussion by asking you, to kind of set the tone or in the context of this discussion. Government has basically set a very ambitious target of achieving net zero for India by 2070, right? And there are multiple other targets that we are working on renewable energy front, right? Which on the larger climate change front, which are part of this, and that includes targets on energy efficiency, etc. How do you look at this entire, development? What is your understanding of this larger decarbonization ambition that we have? And according to you, what is at stake, and how achievable are these targets?
Thank you, Sudhir. Thanks for the opportunity. Good to be with you. I think this is a very significant global priority. You hear this literally every day, and the climate change and decarbonization is something which cannot be neglected anymore, or it could not be postponed for tomorrow. And this also applies to our nation. I think the national leadership, the Government of India leadership, has rightly focused in terms of the commitments that we have done, the Glasgow commitment of 2070 for net zero, but also the intermediate commitment of 2030, where we want 50% of the generation from renewable energy sources or non-fossil fuel sources. I think these are some significant milestones that are good for our journey. This is a complex task. Energy transition from today's 70% coal-fired power generation to tomorrow's 50% non-fossil is not easy, and we need to be mindful of that. And that will definitely mean, you mentioned about the energy sources, that will definitely mean that you have to make the most use of abundance of the natural resources that we have. That can be wind, that can be solar, that can be hydro. These are the three big natural resources that come to our mind. At the same time, it will have to be a phased transition to achieving the net zero, which means the coal-fired power generation will not vanish all of a sudden. So these are the four big sources. But then we should not also forget about the additional support that can come from the gas-fired power generation, that can come from the nuclear power plants. So these are the 6 or 7 broad sources of energy in the energy mix that we will have to see. We also have to be mindful while doing the energy transition of reducing the import dependence for self-sufficiency. Exactly 1 year back, the Prime Minister gave the rallying cry about improving our self-sufficiency and reducing import dependence. So these are the multiple objectives that we will have to keep working on. Fortunately, what we have seen in the last 6 to 8 years, the wind-related, solar-related power generation has started increasing. It is still not where we would like it to be, but now it is important that not only that power generation, but how to provide firmness to it, how to make it firmer when you don't have sun or when you don't have wind. And that is where the round-the-clock focus is essential. So you can complement it by hydro, you can complement it by gas, you can complement it by some other resources. So using all the natural resources, one. Second, bringing the round-the-clock hybrid focus by complementing and bringing some firmness to the infirm sources. This is the second thing. And the third thing is also looking at the emission controls for the coal-fired power plants, upgrading those coal-fired power plants and phasing them out over a systematic period of time. This is the broad way we see that we can achieve and accelerate our journey to the decarbonization.
Mike, you talked about you mentioned coal, and there's a lot of emphasis on coal, and you've just produced a white paper with EY on that also focuses on this this topic that we're discussing today. I want to ask you, the focus on coal is likely to continue. That's right, but then there has to be a parallel effort, a very strong effort that is required to focus on clean coal technologies and new age technologies like CCUS. Uh, so that's one part of it, and simultaneously, we are also supposed to be promoting new fuel sources like hydrogen. How do you, on both of these fronts, clean coal technologies, CCUS, and hydrogen, where do you see India standing today? Do you think we are taking the right steps to get it right? Yeah.
Yeah. So first on the coal, I think the current coal-fired power plants now have a clear mandate from the Ministry of Climate Change, Forest and Climate Change, that they have certain timelines by which they must install SOx and NOx, the sulfur oxide and nitrous oxide emission control norms. So that is the first measure, and the ministry is enforcing it, and we welcome it. We, in fact, definitely want to enforce so that the air quality and the carbon emissions come down. I think that is one element. The supercritical clean new coal technology is the second element that can improve. If there is an addition that needs to be done for coal fired power plants, I think then the supercritical solutions will be much more efficient. As well as from the existing plants, the carbon capture technologies that can help us. And some of that can also result into use of manufacturing hydrogen. I think these are the three aspects on the coal topic, Sudhir. On the hydrogen topic, I think there is the hydrogen policy which has been rolled out a few months back. There is further work that is happening, and we are applauding the work that the ministry is doing for the next steps on hydrogen. I think hydrogen will need economies of scale. Hydrogen will need very significant entire system of infrastructure. It will need the whole ecosystem. We should be very prudent that hydrogen will take us to the desired cleaner future, but there is a journey to be had. There has to be localization of manufacturing hydrogen. There has to be wide scale adoption of hydrogen into transportation as well as the energy generation. And also, we have to be mindful of the cost of electricity that will come when we use hydrogen. So, the economies of scale for manufacturing, but also the cost and price for consuming hydrogen into the technologies is something that we should be focused on. We should be mindful. The last element is the gas turbine technologies that we have will be able to use. Today, they use 50 to 60%. And as time progresses over a few years, we will be able to use hydrogen. So it is more about the ecosystem that needs to be developed, and it has to be economical for the nation to go to hydrogen. So I think that covers some of the broad challenges that you mentioned, Sudhir.
Okay, thank you for those initial comments, Mahesh. Mr. Gupta, let me turn to you at this point, and I want to ask you. You're somebody who has a very sound understanding of the commercial side of business or economics, and you understand you've seen policy, interventions being taken by the government over a long period of time. How they can have a very serious impact on the larger imperatives on business front. So I want to ask you, the white paper also mentions how cutting down the really huge import dependence that we have across energy sector, right? That is crucial for any meaningful effort towards decarbonization, right? So what are the policy levers that are required to ensure that we are able to tackle this problem of high import dependence? And going forward, we are as focus increases more and more on solar or overall renewable energy equipment, and we know that there's a lot of Chinese equipment is there. How do you address that problem from the point of view of energy security and policy incentives that we can offer?
So I think decarbonization without energy security is very difficult to do. And as the events in Europe are telling us that countries need to be energy independent, basically, which is there for them to have long-term sustainable decarbonization solutions. Now, if we look at our own government, basically, which is there, even before what happened in Europe in the current year, the government has been focusing very hard on energy security. So a lot of the actions of the government, so for example, the push on getting the some of the fossil fuel exploration and production up, or using ethanol as a blending fuel, these are all examples of the government being very, very sensitive to energy independence and for India to be self-reliant. Now, if we look at our energy mix, basically, which is there, as both you and Mahesh have mentioned, coal has been the mainstay, basically, which is there. And it's also insulated us because there's a lot of domestic resource of coal which is available, and a lot of the power capacity is based upon coal. So one of the things that Mahesh and you touched upon was about this clean coal technologies. I think there needs to be incentivization, continuous focus, which is there as to how you can actually generate energy using coal, basically, which is there, which is clean, which doesn't have emissions, or the emissions are lower, which is there. So that's one area of work which is there. Second thing which is there is when we start looking at all the renewable solutions which are there. A lot of it is very manufacturing driven. It's around the equipment, and the government has had a PLI scheme for solar panels, which are there for us to be independent and not be import reliant. Now, when you look deeper into this whole issue, basically, which is there, it is solar panels. You can go one level deeper, which is there. For example, lithium batteries are being incentivized. Now, you may also go to the level of critical minerals which are there, which would be required, because that there is an entire value chain which is there. And at some part, you start importing. So I think the focus on the entire value chain, even though we have not touched upon critical minerals in this particular paper, but that's an example of the type of the focus which will need to be brought into the in the future for you to be totally independent. Because, you know, as these as renewable energies become larger, you don't know where the pain points will start emerging. And I think the last point that I would make is what Mahesh also referred to was, you know, for example, of technologies like nuclear. And so I think as you plan your decarbonization mix and start looking at energy solutions which are there, to really focus on those technologies and those solutions which have lower import dependency. Renewables is one of example, and then nuclear, for example, you can store 2 years fuel. So you're not subject to that level of fluctuations in the commodity prices as what we have seen. So I think that is the way I would leave it. Focus on clean coal, look at the entire value chain which is there, and look at technologies where your import dependence would be limited and where you're not subject to certain fluctuations in the marketplace.
Okay, that's very well said, Mr. Gupta, because all of us do understand that we need that kind of focus on clean coal and on fuel side, things which are less impacted by volatility, things like nuclear, for example. Or and one really important point that you made is that when you look at renewables, a lot of that growth, a lot of the kind of growth that we are expecting is going to be manufacturing driven, right? Manufacturing will be very, very key. Local manufacturing will play a key role there. And solar, I'm of course talking in the context of solar. Let me turn to Mahesh again and ask him. Mahesh, you mentioned about gas turbine technology and you mentioned about storage. I want to ask you: is India taking the right steps, right, to ensure that all of these basic requirements that we have, including the fuel and technology sources, storage, and grid infrastructure, they are in place and on time for us to be able to meet these ambitious targets. Yeah. If possible, if you could comment on that. And I remember, and I noted how you were talking about round the clock is going to be more and more essential in future, right? And from that point of view, getting these things right is very, very crucial. So how would you comment on that?
Yeah, these are some very pertinent challenges we face today, Sudhir. There are two or three that you mentioned. One is the storage. Second is the grid stability. So let me cover these. The storage solutions or the round-the-clock hybrid solutions is now getting increasing focus from the MNRE. We have seen in the last couple of years that instead of having the wind tenders or solar capacity tenders, now there are round the clock capacity tenders. And I think that is a very welcome step. We definitely believe that there are different ways you can achieve the round the clock hybrid storage. I mentioned that gas can be a good complement. There is a significant capacity of gas turbines already installed and commissioned in India. But because of the challenging gas prices landing in India, I think we have not been able to use that. But for complementing a storage, that can be one mechanism. The second mechanism could be the typical battery energy storage. But one I would like to really highlight is the pumped hydro storage. And the reason that is important is that's a natural resource. You are not going to import it. This is something that the developed nations have implemented very successfully. I'm very focused on learning from some of the global examples, and India can benefit from it. And we have great technology. General Electric, it is also highlighted in the white paper, but we have pumped hydro storage technology. And the most satisfying thing, Sudhir, is our independent power producers have started embracing this pumped hydro storage technology. There are actual projects that we are now engaged in commissioning and executing. And I think that gives me the confidence that we will be able to leverage based on the situation, based on the geography, we can leverage some of these storage solutions. I'll quickly cover the grid question that you asked. Again, learning from the European nations, it is important that we stay focused and the government stays focused on the grid capacity expansion, but also the quality of grid. And what I mean by that is the stability, managing the frequency fluctuations, delivering consistent stability when the renewable energy starts pumping more percentage of power into the grid. I think the storage is something, as I mentioned, the government has focused, and we definitely believe that learning from some global examples, grid capacity and grid quality is another thing that the government will continue supporting.
Yeah, thanks, Mahesh. And I completely agree with you. The way the private sector, the independent IPPs have now taken up an area which is seen as traditional, let's say PHP, right, pumped hydro. It's absolutely fantastic, and I don't think that kind of thing has ever happened in this country in the past, right? Uh, a lot of this pumped hydro capacity and almost all of it currently is in the public sector space, right? It's owned by uh, PSUs, and now you see IPPs getting into it. So there's a lot of hope there, right? Which we see getting built. And like you rightly said, in developed nations, there's a lot of experience that we can tap into from the point of view of learning. So these are very, very important points, right? Going forward, because we have now started talking about hybrid tenders and hybrid projects. So storage becomes a very, very key and critical area there. Let me also ask you, Mahesh, very quickly, if you can comment upon, we keep on reading about these, when it comes to the kind of requirement for funding that we have for renewables uh, and the larger decarbonization imperative. We keep on reading these reports from time to time saying, $10 billion, $6 billion over a period of time is going to be required for all of these things to be in the place. What is your sense of, the kind of funding requirement that we have, first of all, and how can we, tap into, what needs to be done? Do we need to tap into innovative financing? If yes, in what ways, for example? Similarly, what are the ways to deepen the kind of market for green bonds that we have, if that's a solution for this problem? So, what's your view on this entire investment slash funding kind of part of the discussion on decarbonization? For India?
Yeah. As I mentioned a couple of minutes back, this is going to be a long transition, and it will definitely need significant capital allocation. The capital is needed in different areas, Sudhir. Where when you see the new renewable energy projects and when you see the new hybrid projects, you do see the global investors from all around the world are interested. They see India as a very attractive market for renewable energy growth, and we see them committed for equity or debt that these projects need. So that is one element of it. Where I think we need more, and where I would really encourage that the government of India focuses on to support this need, is in the area of research and development and in the area of manufacturing. Because while the global investors and the private equity funds will invest in the projects, we will need support from the local Indian financing ecosystem when it comes to the research and development. Competitive lower cost of hydrogen will need a lot of research development. Hybrids will need research and development. Some of the round the clock will need significant storage, will need significant investment. So R&D as well as manufacturing and export incentives, which means India has capabilities. We believe in a philosophy, Sudhir, that innovate and make in India for India and the world. And this means we can also be a great supporter by exporting it, but it will need the R&D in manufacturing will definitely need investments. So that's the way I see the broad landscape.
Okay. Mr. Gupta, so Mahesh is saying that, when it comes to investments, he would like to see a lot of this new investment in decarbonization efforts going towards R&D and manufacturing. What is your sense of, the larger investment scenario that exists and the long-term, outlook for investment that we have for our economy, particularly from the energy sector's point of view? And what specifically are the things that we can do, to ensure from a policy point of view, maybe, or from business models point of view, maybe if there's anything that we can do to ensure that, funding, it gets the right kind of funding support, the entire implement.
So, a lot of funding is required. And I'd make one comment. I think we are at a point of great transition, which is there, and where there's an unprecedented opportunity, which is there for businesses to create new business models and emerge as winners. So I just give you an example to contextualize this. Is, for example, in the EV space, we have seen new players emerge and who have got huge valuations, and there's a lot of capital which is flowing into them. So it's a great opportunity for private businesses to set up new business models for new services. And, for example, tomorrow you may have a big market for decarbonized steel, for example, which is there. So I think depending upon how the Indian businesses develop new models, you could have a lot of funding which is available. Now, coming to very specific things which are there, one of the things which the government is also focusing is on green bonds. Now, if you go a little deeper into the green bonds, really what you need to be able to do is to develop some sort of a taxonomy around that, which is, can you measure the emissions which are there? What is the impact of the green bonds? Are you able to cut down on the emissions as a result of that funding? What is the level of reduction which is there? So I think a whole ecosystem can be developed around this. This ecosystem doesn't exist today, and India can take a lead over there. The second thing which is there is that you have a lot of global money which is there by fund managers, which is getting allocated for investments, which will help in abating emissions. It's a little bit broader today, which is there in terms of ESG, but it will probably need to get more specific in terms of cutting down on emissions. And the green bond market is seen as $1 trillion market. Even if a little bit of that comes to India, it could be very helpful, which is there. The third point that I'd make is over here is that, from a regulatory point of view, if there was to be less uncertainty. So, for example, if the financial health of the electricity boards were to improve, even though that's not a focus of the paper, it'll make it much easier for funding to come, for cash flows to improve, for the business models to start looking better. And as Mahesh said, what government could do in terms of making business models which are more sustainable, where they generate their cash flows on a sustainable basis without requiring the intervention of the government beyond a point. If we were able to achieve that, then I have no doubt that a lot of capital could flow into India, because it's a great opportunity to create value, actually, more than anything else in a way.
Thanks, Rajneesh. Mahesh, you want to quickly comment upon that, that aspect of, how we need to also simultaneously look at probably, issues like financial health of discoms, because ultimately that is what the lending agencies look at. Yeah, right. That is the ultimate off-taker of electricity. So if that is not right, it becomes very, very important to look at it.
Yes, Sudhir, it is an important point what Rajneesh mentioned, and I echo that, because it's the whole value chain. If the discoms have these financial challenges, it reflects on our customers, which are the power generating companies, and then in turn it reflects on the technology companies. So this is a real challenge. We also understand and appreciate the government is focused with finding different solutions and finding different ways to reduce this stress. But this definitely is fundamental, and we do hope and we do expect that the focus remains to improve this financial situation.
Okay, thank you, Mahesh. And with that ray of hope, I think it's time to wrap up this discussion. It's a very engaging and very interesting discussion. I would really love to spend more time with both of you discussing this, but then time is not really on our side, and we'll have to wrap it up. Let me just try and summarize it by saying that we've had a lot of really important points. Mahesh has talked about in the beginning of his comments. He talked about how transition is going to be complex, right? It's going to be a complex task, but at the same time, there is a need to definitely increase our focus on even technologies like gas and nuclear, in addition to the usual traditional all the other areas that we are working on already. We need to kind of ramp up our focus on that. He's also saying that one important change that is happening is round the clock, right? And that focus is very essential going forward. He is also saying that government is also already looking at steps to address the reduction of SOx and NOx in emissions. But we also need to focus more on supercritical technology, gas turbine technology, particularly from the point of view of hydrogen. Also, it becomes very important for hydrogen uptake, right? Then we had Mahesh is also talking about hybrid tenders. That's a new shift that is happening, and how as part of the larger private sector effort towards supporting renewables, we also have now started seeing a lot of IPPs getting into things like PHP, right? But then there's a need to learn from the experience of developed nations there. Then we had Rajneesh also talking about a very important point that ultimately decarbonization without energy security is difficult, right? And this RE growth is going to be manufacturing driven, and nuclear is going to things like nuclear, they're always good from the point of view of fluctuation, right? There is less fluctuation there, so maybe there's a need to focus more on that. Apart from the fact that clean coal focus has to continue, and yeah. And in the end, we have talked about investments also, where Mahesh is saying that going forward, he would want to see more focus of investments on R&D and manufacturing, particularly the R&D part. I must say that that's very crucial, and this is one of those things which is one of those things which are not generally talked about in detail. So perhaps it's time to change our thinking there and start looking at it more closely. Uh, he's also saying that transition is an opportunity for businesses to look at maybe new models. And Rajneesh is saying that there's a lot of potential that exists in the green bond market globally, and we must tap into it. This is the time to tap into that opportunity. And the most important point is financial health of discoms. Ultimately, that is where businesses need to look at new models to it's important for them to look better, right? If we have to attract the right kind of investments. I hope that sums it up. And gentlemen, thank you for your time. And it was such an engaging discussion, and I really look forward to hosting you again on our platform. With those words, let's close the discussion. And thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you for investing your time. Thanks a lot, Rajneesh.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mahesh. Thanks a lot, Sudhir. It's a pleasure being on your show.